I'm Megan Skidmore, and welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts on a faith journey and all aspects of life. Join me as I bring this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I firmly believe we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with asking questions and allowing doubts. When we are more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. Hopeful Spaces is a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. It's a free monthly parent, ally, or caregiver support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. Email chc@dallashopecharities.org for more info. First Friday's free coaching, a confidential group to bring all the questions, vent frustrations, share fears, express doubts. Navigating a new and uncertain reality is hard enough. Let's remove the worry of judgment from others. In this group, I will help you help yourself so that you can be there for your child, family, loved ones, and for you too. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. You must complete the agreement. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm Megan Skidmore, your host, and I have Shannon Panszi with me today. I said that right?
Yes, you did. One of the few.
I had the pleasure of meeting you in person earlier this year at a summit that we both attended in Connecticut. And we got to chatting and getting to know one another. And I was pleased to find out that we have some common interests, some common foci in our work. By profession, you are a physician, correct?
I'm retired, but yes, I was an OBGYN.
Right. And so your niche, your area of education is in gender.
Correct.
And so you bring a very unique perspective to this space. And so I really wanted to have you on so we could talk about that and you could share that expertise with us. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
So as you know, one of the intersections of this space for me is being from a conservative faith background. And in a few of our chats prior to today, there are some differences in our faith, which is great. I think that's wonderful, but I found it curious, those differences. I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about your own background, your origin, your family, your faith, and all of those things.
So I was raised Unitarian Universalist. Many people haven't heard of it or come to it later in life. There's not many of us that I usually joke there's not many of us that were born into it. But it is a non-creedal religion. They kind of take the philosophies of all religion and believe everyone finds their own path, and we believe in questioning each other and our beliefs because we believe questioning makes everyone stronger. And I think my parents came to that because they were missing something in their own faiths. My dad's Mexican. He was raised Catholic and a little bit of Methodist. And my mom is German and was Catholic and Lutheran. And what they tell me is that they just didn't feel any real connection. And when they had kids, they felt like we needed to be raised in some religious institution. So they found Unitarian Universalism, and that's where we were raised.
Awesome. So very unique, very vibrant background. I love that for you. That's your current faith now of practice?
For the most part, yes.
For the most part?
Yes.
So I like to talk about how we navigate questions and doubts. And so your journey is going to be very different. I'm sure yours is going to be, you already mentioned in your community that questions are, you said
encouraged.
You believe in them. They're encouraged. They make everyone stronger.
Right.
Can you share with us a little bit more about that philosophy? I think that is wonderful.
Well, the idea is that if somebody's going to bring a different thought, a different belief to you than is your own, you get the chance to evaluate it against what you're believing. So you're either going to pivot or change your beliefs because you think the person or whomever bringing this to you may have a valid point there, or you're going to see why you don't believe in that, and thus making what you believe stronger. So either which way, because it forces an evaluation of what you're believing, that's what makes it stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely cultivates critical thinking skills, reasoning skills,
I
and
think it I think it also makes questions less threatening
mhm,
because we're taking them in not with the assumption that we have to change. We're just taking them in and getting curious about, well,
yeah.
how does this measure up? So I think that's the other way in which it's affected me is I'm not super threatened by questions.
That's really healthy. I think in my own personal journey, if I had realized that being curious and holding space was an option for me, I may not have felt quite like my foundation completely crumbled and fell apart under my feet. And I'm not alone in that. I know of others who feel that same way. And I have learned for myself, the more that I do allow uncertainty and that I allow those questions, and I'm not necessarily looking for hard and fast answers.
Right.
It's a healthier approach. I love what you said, that you're not threatened by questions.
Mhm.
So today happens to be Transgender Day of Remembrance,
Mhm.
and that is another reason I wanted to invite you on to the podcast. When you learn that your child identifies somewhere in the LGBTQIA plus community, because gender is so defined in such a binary way, in a faith, in a conservative faith, and I know my faith of origin is not the only. It really rocks your world and
Mhm.
the world of the child too. The child often doesn't feel safe in sharing because of that threat of uh, am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be rejected? Am I going to be seen? Is it going to be a safe place for me to talk about this? Because they don't know at all how that will be received. And so I'm hoping to create some safety here around these topics that people who listen don't necessarily have to agree with, but they can at
Mhm.
least be open to listening and entertaining new ideas that they're not yet either exposed to or familiar with. So can you share with us about your space
Mhm.
and what kind of drew you there? And
Sure.
yeah, let's start with that.
So my journey it started over a decade ago. We had
Okay.
a loved one come out as
Okay.
transgender, as their true self, and my husband and I are the physicians in the family. So we took it on to try to navigate the healthcare. And
Okay.
I quickly realized that there wasn't a lot of education in healthcare. There wasn't a lot of understanding. And as I kept doing my own reading and research, that I realized that there was biology, like there was so much science there. And a lot of it came, I finished medical school in 2000. A lot of it came after that. So it kind of, or around the time I was in medical school. So it kind of made sense that I probably wasn't, and most physicians
Mhm.
aren't familiar with
This
it.
wasn't addressed at all in medical school, I'm guessing.
No, no,
Wow.
and I often give the analogy, neither was autism. So I mean, like
Oh,
there were a lot
wow.
of things just to put in perspective
Hmm.
that were not mentioned because I think we do have like in medicine, we get a general learning of all systems and things, but not all conditions, not all
Hmm.
diversities. So I think that's important to recognize of like the timing of things. But I also was not just learning the science part, I was also figuring out how to advocate within healthcare, within a
Hmm.
system that wasn't aware, not that they weren't aware, but didn't have processes, didn't know how to affirm people and acknowledge people for who they were in certain situations. I say that because, like without a legal name change, how do you get somebody to say the name and not say
Yeah.
the legal name out loud? But I had a friend who adopted a child from another country, not transgender at all.
Hmm.
But the legal name was very complicated and long, and most people look at it and have no idea how to pronounce it. And she was like, I don't understand why you have a problem. Everyone uses the anglicized name of my child, which is not the
Oh,
legal name. No problem. I've never had to tell them to use anything else.
that's
So,
fascinating. That's such a great example of that concept at
right.
play. Hmm.
So I think I just began to dive in. I realized that I was really good at explaining gender to people. I
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's that like you don't have to change anything you think. I'm just presenting you the facts. And people often tell me that I bring it in a very simple way. But usually it's because it is simple. I think what makes it not simple is how all of us are raised, myself included, right? We are
Yeah.
raised to think that your biological characteristics
Mm-hmm.
are your gender, like they're one and the same. I don't think there's any one of
Right.
us that has been raised differently. So when you find out that someone you love is transgender, it's going to challenge what feels like a core belief that we have
Right.
had. And so it makes sense that people struggle. It makes sense that until you recognize those are two separate things, that our anatomy doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
us who we are,
Mm-hmm.
then we can begin to embrace and understand and accept.
Mm-hmm.
But people have to be willing to let go. And it's kind of scary to let go of something you believe to be a fact your whole life.
So when you're speaking to a group or on your podcast or sharing, what is how do you define gender versus sexuality? What is your definition?
So sexuality is something different. If you're a biological sex, do you mean sexual orientation and gender
Well, you know what?
or
That's a really good
biological
point.
sex?
Okay. How about all of those?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so biological sex, we
Uh-huh.
typically classify people as male, female, or intersex. And if you don't know what intersex is, I'll explain in just a second. But male and female typically have their four characteristics. We don't look at all of them when people are born. We look at the external anatomy. So that's one part. Sometimes in life, we may look at internal anatomy. That's the second part of the biological sex. The third part are chromosomes. And the fourth
Mm-hmm.
part is the hormone. When I say dominance, which hormone is going to drive the development of the system?
Wow.
Because we have all of us have all the sex hormones, but which
Mm-hmm.
one's going to drive the development? So that those are the biological characteristics. Now, what intersex is, meaning those four things, that an individual that does not have all four of those things that that classify as male or female, that's an umbrella term that falls intersex. There's tons of different conditions that can fall under there,
Okay.
but it means all the person does not meet all four of them. So
Okay.
that's
So
just
say those four one more time. What are they?
their external anatomy, and I'm talking about the genitals. I'm just trying to
Right.
internal anatomy, chromosomes, and the
Mm.
hormone dominance, like the
Okay.
ratios, what drives the system.
Got it. Okay. So that's kind of your gender.
Sex.
That's sex. That's biological sex.
Yes.
So then how would you define sexuality and then also gender?
So I usually say sexual orientation, and that's
Mm-hmm.
who you're attracted to, whether that's spiritually, emotionally, physically. There's a lot of different attractions, but sexual attraction or sexual orientation is who you're attracted to.
Okay.
Where gender identity is an inner sense of self. It's who we know ourselves to be.
Yeah.
No matter what the world sees when they look at you, it's your inner sense of self, who you know yourself to be. And I'd add one more term in there, which is gender expression. Gender
Mm-hmm.
expression is how we wear our hair, the clothes we wear, our grooming, our behavior. Society tends to define those as masculine or feminine, and androgynous being in the middle of that
Right.
spectrum. But I bring that up because a lot of people say, well, that looks like, right? And so what you're looking at is a gender expression. But gender identity is an inner
Yeah.
sense of self. There are people that live their entire lives and don't let people know who they are truly, that inner sense of self.
Which would be their gender identity, that internal.
Exactly. That's
Right.
exactly right.
And unfortunately, we do get judged by the external
Yes, we do.
more often than not, or we're sized up, or people look for external cues to make sense of what's going on around them.
Right.
Okay, so you have these kind of basic understandings in place. You are, you work with clients, you work with groups, whatever. What are some of the key fears or concerns or worries that you have come up that are expressed to you?
Well, it depends who I'm working with. I work nowadays mainly with physicians. So, but I have worked in the past with families. I do facilitate support groups for
Okay.
parents and guardians and loved ones of transgender and non-binary and gender
Okay.
questioning individuals. So I'd say with families, the biggest concern is safety for the child. It's probably the number one concern. And I think that's where people sometimes have reactions that some people may not view as very favorable. I think it's coming from a desire to keep the child safe, even though it tends to
Mhm.
do the opposite. So I'm talking about the rejection, the I'll throw you
Uh-huh.
out, right? With the thinking like
Make
this
them
will
not
change
change.
them.
Yeah.
Right. And then, and then they'll be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think safe, and then I think once there is an acceptance, there's an issue of safety of the world around.
Yeah. So there is lots going on in the world around us. And I think there are people who truly don't understand this safety piece as it's related to the political climate. And I do not intend to get political on this podcast. The only reason I bring that element in is because what you've just described, biological sex, which is external anatomy, internal chromosomes, the hormone dominance. Then you also have someone's sexual orientation, who they're attracted to. Then you have their gender identity, which is how they feel on this inside, like their being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their existence. And then how they choose to express that on the outside, right? You have all of those things that have been politicized. And by that, I mean, they are turned into bills and laws that are attempting to get passed, and some of them have gotten passed. And these are real people trying to live their real lives, but because it's getting managed by others who I think I can safely say that have never met them, don't know them, or their families, or their life experience. I mean, it's kind of a scary thing. And often, I don't know, maybe you can speak a little more to this, but I don't know that actual medical professional are necessarily consulted. Um, Maybe sometimes, depending on the situation, on who is, I guess, lobbying for it, fighting for it, or not, whatnot. Can you speak to, like, in your perception, what are some of these fears that people could be, probably are facing right now in this space, particularly transgender and non-binary individuals?
Well, first, to speak of without getting political, I do think medical organizations have tried to explain things because all professional medical organizations, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychological Association, the Endocrine Society, the American College of OBGYN, they all support gender affirming care,
Mm-hmm.
like across the board. And
Yes.
I should say the main medical ones. There are
Yes.
some out there that are set up to go against the LGBTQ plus community, like the American College of Pediatrics is not a real national medical, because in medicine we're not we I think we try not to be political. So, but sometimes we're forced in that realm, which is very
Yes.
uncomfortable for us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, but I think the real fears right now among the transgender non-binary community and their families is losing gender affirming care,
Mm-hmm.
losing the dignity. I mean, just yesterday it came out that there's a bill proposed in congressional property, bathrooms have to be based on biological sex.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that, there's so many problems with that.
Right.
But the problem with that, well, first off, who's going to know unless someone's open, like Representative Sarah McBride, that's where this all came from, who's an
Yeah.
openly transgender woman. Who's going to know? And how are you going to check? And what if it's
Right.
challenged, right? The other aspect is I have heard people from the community talk about that live in places where those are the laws, and when they have gone into bathrooms, because we all have to use the bathroom at some point,
Mm-hmm.
gone into bathrooms, followed the law, gone based on their biological sex, they have been assaulted because they
Oh,
don't look the way people think they're supposed to look to go into those bathrooms.
Right.
or it outs them, and people have issues with that too. The truth of the matter is transgender people have been using the bathroom for a long time
Mm-hmm.
based on the identity, and it's not an issue. So that aside, without getting political, I think people are afraid
Right.
because what does that mean for your quality of life if you have to think about, well, if I leave the house, I may not be able to use the bathroom. So how long can I go? Where am I going? I better not drink too
Mm-hmm.
much. I mean, there's all these things to consider. Even traveling, where am I
Mm-hmm.
traveling to? Is it going to be safe for me? So those are the things that are concerned. I think it's the receiving medical care, specifically gender affirming care, just the day to day things like bathrooms. For families that have children, it's a bigger concern, the gender affirming care, as well as kids that want to play sports. Will they be able to
Right.
play sports? Will they be safe in school? There's a lot of things about schools too.
Right.
So it's I just stay in the what is going on right now and try to hang on to that.
Yeah. I don't know if there is an answer to this next question that's coming up for me, but if you were to offer advice or suggestions for those that are these topics still very feel very uncomfortable for them,
Hmm.
and as you were even listing them, in their mind was as it should be, and that's the way it should be, and right, if you could offer them anything that might just begin to tease their thought processes a little bit, to wiggle it a little loose, maybe open it up a little,
Hmm.
just just a space of curiosity, what might you offer them?
For the families, most of them are living their lives like any other family. I think a lot of people assume a lot of things about having a transgender non-binary child. Like maybe they think the child's histrionic or that's all the family talks about or things like that. I worked with so many families. The main issues for them are like, are they changing their underwear? Are they bathing? Like it's normal family stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could imagine your own family and your own children, that if they wanted to do something that, when I say do something, I'm thinking about sports that made them happy, that brought joy,
Mm-hmm.
that there's so much good that comes out of that. And people are pointing at you for what is a biodiversity. And what I mean by that is like everything in nature is diverse. Like that's the one
Mm-hmm.
thing about science. There's
Yeah.
nothing in biology that we can say is on the binary. It's not this or that. Nature is constantly
Yeah.
changing things so that nothing is binary. And that's how we evolve. That's how we survive. That is nature.
Yeah.
And so to expect that there would be two genders or to expect that there'd be two sexes, we already talked about that. We know there's not. There's the third intersex, which is a big umbrella term,
Right.
is kind of wild because that would be the only place in biology that that was true, the only place in nature. So I think there are two things. I think is one, realizing that biodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other part of it is just realizing these are families, these are kids, there's loving.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a misconception, well, there definitely is a misconception that people who are transgender, non-binary have psychological problems. They don't. We know that
Mm-hmm.
it's not a psychiatric problem.
Right. It's been
None of the medical
removed from the
community
DSM. Yeah.
since 2013,
Yeah.
but the community's known that way before that. And it just took medicine a little
Right.
bit longer
It
to
took
get there.
society a while longer, but
But
but that's history repeating itself as well. There is a pattern there, right? As
right.
we.
And I think if you recognize that, like the medical society did not recognize it till 2013, the mistake they had made for years, it makes sense that everyone else, like that's the way we were raised to think it was a psychological problem if you had any familiarity with
Yeah.
it at all. So, but I think that's the other thing, it's not. And many people, time when people meet these families, you made the point earlier about have politicians even met them, and they realize like these are families like you and me. I remember
Mm-hmm.
one family that had almost lost a friend because they couldn't believe they were allowing this child was prior to puberty. They were socially transitioning, and the mom told me that she was talking to one of her best friends from college and explaining, the new name and what was going on. And her friend really pushed back, like, how could you do this? How could you do this? And even, I think, sent her some articles from a well-known psychologist who lost their license because they believed in conversion therapy. So they kind of believed forced them into their biological sex.
Right, right.
And when the parent said, you don't think I've looked at all of this already? You don't think I've read all these things already? Like, I've read all of it. And her friend's response was, this is how I feel about my kid with ADHD and the decision to put them on medicine. I was presented with all information to go against it. I had looked at it all. So finding that commonality, no, ADHD is, not necessarily the same, although it is a diversity, it's a neurodiversity, but seeing that connection of, like, as a parent, she recognized, oh yes, of course you would have looked at everything, just like I've looked at everything for my child. And I'm making the best decision, even though I know other people may not agree.
Can we just normalize diversity?
I try to teach that all the time. I teach schools just to say most, but not all. Most people have this, but not all, because then we begin to, like, normalize diversity, that there is nothing that's all.
Yeah. And nothing really stays the same. Change is the one constant.
Yes.
So, not to belabor this point, but just kind of one more tangent. So those that maybe don't feel comfortable around the trans non-binary issues, what is something you could offer them? Like, nobody's asking you to go and lobby or picket or be an advocate or outspoken or anything, towards their cause or helping them be seen. None of that. But there are things that maybe they could step back from or pull back from. You don't. I guess what I'm trying to say is those that maybe don't fully understand and feel some kind of worry or fear coming up about it. What would you offer them? What would you suggest for them in navigating that in a way that it doesn't cause harm to others? In other words, you don't need to go and be actively speaking against it, but at the same time,
I think
what are some ways that they could help make this space just a little bit safer or tone down a little bit? Is that possible?
I think remember that I have some familiarity with your faith, but not enough to be able to speak it completely to this. But I do think there is a value, and correct me if I'm wrong, in loving people for being human. Like, they are God's child, I believe. Is that the right language? Please help me. But I mean, this is a human being and created. I think they are created as they are. I think for many people that get the wonderful opportunity to have a loved one, somebody they care about, be transgender or non-binary, you see the beauty in transition. You see when someone becomes their true self and you get to see them be genuinely happy. This is what people want as parents.
Yeah.
This is who they are. And I think that's really hard for people to understand that have not met somebody be their true self. I think it's one of the most beautiful things in the world. And when we see that, it's hard for me to understand why people don't think that's exactly the way they were created. The brain, has different development, and we have beginning to understand that for transgender non-binary people, that specifically for transgender individuals, their brain development is very similar to others with the same identity. And most of the transgender community does not like me to talk about brain studies.
Okay. That's interesting.
Because it leans towards pathologizing, but it's not a pathology. It's just a diversity of development. And also because people want to be believed when they say this is who I am. There's no test that's 100%. The best thing is listening to people when they say who they are. So those are the two reasons. But I do think it's important to bring up that when you think about, well, that's, when people say that about the transgender community, that's not how they were created. I can't speak to anyone about their faiths, but I truly believe, having worked with the community and knowing the science, that it's exactly who they're meant to be.
Before we hit record, we talked a little bit about this. And I was asking you, how things were for you when you found out about this loved one and their identity. And because for me, it was a very distinct experience. My world was very much rocked. And I was fascinated by your response. So I want, if you will, share that response
Well, I
here.
just want to clarify, it's not that the family's world was not rocked, myself included. It was rocked, but I think your
Okay.
question for me was, I'm trying to remember,
Doubts. I think it was about
did I
like
have
what
doubts?
what doubts, questions, or how did you navigate that?
I think you asked me questions or doubts about my faith. And so now that you understand a little bit about my faith, like my faith is taking things in. So from a faith perspective,
Yes.
nothing there. I didn't have any, none of, I didn't have, I shouldn't say none of us. I didn't have any doubts on who this person was. When they told me who they were, I myself and a few other members of the family had full acceptance. But of course, it was all new to us at the same time. 11 years ago, it was not in the public eye. So there was a little
Hmm.
bit about, okay, let me try to understand this better.
Okay.
And so we could see the happiness, and it was a child. So of this child, we could see the happiness of the child. And I think the biggest questions for a lot of us is, how do we keep this child safe? Will the child
Hmm.
make friends? What will their life be like? Um, will it be a good life? All those things. So we still had work to do, but I think I heard you on one of your previous podcasts say something like most parents go through a period in which they did not act the way they had wished they would have acted when their child came out. I think that's usually true, but not always true. And again, it comes back to
Hmm.
diversity. I don't say that to make anyone feel bad. It makes sense why people struggle at the beginning, but it's not always the case.
Hmm.
There's a lot of diversity and experience too. So we embraced the child. It didn't rock our faith because of what our faith was.
Yeah, that's what it
And
was. You're right.
mhm.
Yeah, because you already had been taught and believed that questions were not just fine, but that they were welcomed and encouraged, and they make everyone stronger. That's what you
Yes.
said. Yeah.
And what rocked my world more is within my own congregation, like separate from what was going on in the family. But
Hmm.
in our own congregation, they'd started wanting to understand gender better. And as I became educated, I started helping educate the community. And I was so surprised, knowing what my faith is, that there was so much resistance even within my community, not from the
Really.
leaders, but from within, mainly of the older generation. But, and again, I think it's
Hmm.
understandable when you've lived most of your life thinking, you know, what somebody's anatomy is how they identify. That's who they are. But
Hmm.
having to let go of that belief is hard.
Yeah, that is interesting, even among some of your fellow faith members. I guess that's just part of being human, no matter what
There's
faith.
diversity everywhere.
Yeah, so true, so true. Um, so let's talk a little bit about that. How did you navigate, or how does your community navigate that open communication, expressing what's going on and your questions, maybe your fears? Like, to have a safe space is not always a given. I believe they have to be created, and so it takes someone to go first, I believe, and be the brave one, so to speak. Can you speak to what that was like? You mentioned there were some that didn't have any qualms, or they were okay with it, and there were others that resisted. Like, did you have conversations? Did you have open discussion that you can recall? I know this was a
Yes.
little bit a while ago.
Yeah. Well, and our family has more than one transgender individual in it now. So
Okay.
trying to remember. No, I think the first one was because of when it was, and it had such an awareness. I do remember a lot of more details of that one. But
Hmm.
I think of the family members, some people went into researching and reading.
Hmm.
Um, to some degree, it made sense. So this child identified as a boy,
Hmm.
and but had for a long time seemed to express himself very masculine and was really mild mannered and quiet. And so when, like, he never really spoke up much except Like when I remember he would wear a Superman shirt and someone would call him Supergirl. He'd be like, no, I'm Superman. Like he couldn't even ask you where the water fountain was or where the bathroom was. But for this, if anyone called him Supergirl, he corrected them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think all the families, all these kind of behaviors, that's just one example that that I think it made things make more sense to people, but then we just had to understand, well, what does this mean? You know, I think there's a real common question, especially among kids. What if he changes his mind? I think that's a question I hear among a lot of families
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of our larger family did. I think, well, among the older generation, the grandparent generation, most of them, a few of them are kind of scientifically based. They were okay, great. The ones that were not scientifically based rejected it, like would not
Mm-hmm.
accept a change in name or change in pronouns, really gave the
Mm-hmm.
parents a hard time of what, how could you do this? And I think the parents and that grandparent I'm thinking of stopped speaking for a
Okay.
few months, which was unusual. They typically spoke more often. And then I don't really remember what brought around, but some
Mm-hmm.
point they started talking again. And when
Yeah.
they did, that grandparent was using the correct pronouns. So I don't really know what happened. I just know for a few months it was quiet and then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a holiday dinner was just fine all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's really good. Yeah. I did remember one other thing I would love for you to briefly give your advice or insight on. Can you share why is gender affirming care important?
When people get to live as their true selves, they're a more productive human in society. They are more content in life. To not provide gender affirming care leads to higher levels of depression. I mean, I can only imagine. I don't know what it's like, but I can only imagine not being seen as ourselves. I think
Mm-hmm.
all of us might have a smidge of experience of it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
as a woman, I've
Right.
often been dismissed of what I'm capable of doing,
Right.
right? They don't see me and my abilities and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a child, this will give a little bit of my age away, which I'm not ashamed of. But we kept the Dorothy Hamill haircut when we were little, which was the Olympic ice skater who had short hair. So I had short hair as a child. I got called a
Mm-hmm.
boy all the time. It's a joke in my family. The first complete sentence I ever said is, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. Now it's a little different because my family was telling me I was a girl. I identified as a girl. So it
Right.
was more like everyone else is an idiot.
But
That's
you still understood who you were in order to say to the contrary of what they were saying to you.
right. But I
Mhm.
remember it wearing on me sometimes if it happened too many times in a row of like, what is wrong with people?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, gender affirming care is it's the standard of care.
Hmm.
It's necessary. I mean, I equate it to any other part of medical care. And I think the thing to understand is transgender people, everyone assumes every transgender person wants everything done,
Right.
medicine, surgery, everything. But that's not the case.
Hmm.
What people need to have themselves in alignment with who they are is going to vary person to person. Some
Yeah,
people
that's
will
true.
want no medicine, no surgery. Some people will want medicine and no surgery. Some people want all of it, bits of it,
Right.
because it's about who we know ourselves to be. Like I've known some transgender men that are like, I want to keep my uterus. It's a part of who I am. I feel very connected to it. And I've had known other transgender men that are like, stay covered up. They don't want to see that part of their body. They want as much of it out as possible. So it's just such a variety. But that's the thing. And that's medicine. Like any
Yeah.
other part of medicine, we tailor our treatment to the individual.
Yeah.
And gender affirming care is allowing people to be in alignment with who they know themselves to be.
I think it is so important that you mentioned that it's going to look different for everybody and not to assume that they're going to get everything, and not even to assume what that means, right? These are very personal topics that, you know, I encourage folks to do your research, to do your reading, and you are an excellent source for that. I highly encourage folks to follow your Instagram account and go to your website. You have some amazing resources on this topic.
Thank you. And my podcast also is, we try to
Yes.
touch a
Yes.
topic every week. But the one thing I will say about gender affirming care as well, gender affirming care is also using people's names and pronouns.
Yes.
That is gender affirming care, which
Yeah.
we all have, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want people to call me she.
Mm-hmm.
I want people to call me Shannon.
Yeah.
And just like the friend I mentioned whose child did go by their anglicized name or their,
Right.
their
Right.
American name, wanted to be called that
Pronunciation. Right.
name.
Uh-huh.
So that
It's a
is a
matter of respect. Like my name is pronounced Megan. It's a long E, but my entire life to this day, I still get misnamed, I guess. People mispronounce it. Megan.
what happens? Like, how do you feel when people say it wrong?
When I was younger, I was just too shy.
Mhm.
And I'm talking like grade school, really young.
Yes.
But I just correct them. I just say, actually, it's with a long E. It's Megan. But anyway, you were saying, and we just carry on, right?
But how did you feel when people said it wrong?
It's kind of just, it's a disappointment to me, especially if maybe it's not the first time that we've met or interacted. It's a little pang. It's a little disappointing. Like you feel it because you don't necessarily feel seen or remembered or like, I'm just, yeah.
A
Yeah,
name means a lot.
it
It
does.
does.
It does mean a lot. Mm-hmm.
I get called Sharon, Shanna, Shayna, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I was talking to somebody the other day and they called me Sharon. And the first time I was like, let's see if I heard that right. And when they did it a second time, and when they did it a second time, I'm like, just like you said, it's actually Shannon and move on. But I had to say it because I couldn't connect to the conversation. Like they were
Mm-hmm.
trying to say something to me, but every time they said my name wrong, I was like, who are you talking to? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like, of course I knew, but I
Right.
couldn't connect because it's not my name.
Right. Anything else you can think of that you would like to leave with our listeners that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
I think there's a lot of information out there,
Mm-hmm.
and I what I want to encourage you to do is be curious.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear, I think what's become commonplace right now in the political environment is, you know, they want to let men in women's bathroom, for example. But if you're knowledgeable, man is an identity. And no
Mm-hmm.
one's letting men into women's bathrooms, right? That's just an example. But continue to learn, be curious,
Mm-hmm.
be aware that whatever your belief system is, and I don't mean faith, I just mean like what you're
Yeah.
drawn to on your social media, you're going to get more of it.
Yeah.
So try to learn stories. If you want to understand more, not change your mind, but read or watch people's life stories that have shared their books. The current representative, Sarah McBride, has a wonderful book about her life called Tomorrow Will Be Different. There is Sissy by Jacob Tobiah, who's a non-binary
Mm-hmm.
person. They tell their stories in such a beautiful human way that you don't have to be transgender, non-binary to find connection to their stories of that very common story of figuring out who you are,
Yeah. Just being
uh,
human. Mm-hmm.
just being human. And I think
Yeah.
that's the last thing is remember people are human and
Yeah.
just, love them. I
See
think
the
there's so much
human.
hate on both
Yeah.
sides. The
That's fair.
how
Yeah.
can you be so horrible to not understand and accept is I don't blame people that say that and feel that way because a lot of times they've dealt with trauma and they're fighting for
Mm-hmm.
life, right?
Yeah.
But I understand that doesn't feel good to receive that. And it also doesn't feel good to receive the hate of you're not who you say you are. Would any of us want somebody to tell us who we are?
Exactly. No.
No.
Well, final question I always ask all my guests, trying to peel back the negativity or the shame that's often associated with acknowledging that you have doubts, and allowing the questions and all of that is, what does it mean to you to live beyond the shadow of doubt?
I think it means freedom.
That's excellent. I do too.
Yeah, I think it means freedom because, yeah, it can be scary to question. And even so, the work that I do with physicians, they're sometimes afraid to ask the question because they feel like they should know. They should know the answers already. It's a biological process. But as long as they hold on to I should know, they'll never learn. And I think that's a great example. When you can live beyond this shadow of a doubt, you can learn, you can find out, you can discover. That's the freedom.
Totally. That's a great answer. So we want to get to know you. I'm just looking for one word answers, maybe two.
Okay.
Tell us your favorite book.
Ooh, to pick one's hard, but
Or
I'll go with the color purple.
Okay. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Extrovert.
And are you a night owl or a morning lark?
Morning lark.
Lucky. And who is your favorite artist?
Ooh, I did hear you ask this one before.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, my son. He's a guitarist.
Yay, I love
And
that.
he wrote the music for my podcast.
That is excellent.
How could I not think of that right away?
Yeah, we'll leave a link for your podcast, by the way, in the show notes. Who's your celebrity crush? Oh dear.
Jason Momoa.
I love it.
I'm not proud, but that's just it. Okay.
I think it's awesome and hilarious. Okay, do you do still or carbonated water, or are you diet soda fan?
Still water. I do not like bubbles. When I was a kid, I used to shake up sodas to get the bubbles out.
To get them out, yeah. Okay,
yeah,
and
still
then
water.
The furthest place you've traveled. That's the last one.
Austria, but I was very, very young.
Still counts in my book.
It counts. Yes.
So Shannon, if folks wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way? Would it be your Instagram account?
Probably, just because sometimes that gets buried. I would go to my email, shannon@engenderlove.com.
Okay, I'll leave that.
You can also find it on my website too. There's a contact form there too.
Awesome. I'll leave all those links in the show notes, including your podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Thank you.
Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Brene Brown said, "Living into our values means that we do more than profess our values. We practice them. We walk our talk. We are clear about what we believe and hold important, and we take care that our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors align with those beliefs." End quote. Before you can walk your talk, you must identify what your core values are. Identifying your core values is like thinking ahead of time. It reduces decision fatigue. It becomes your North Star, guiding you as you navigate new decisions or decisions you've come to realize that perhaps you didn't get to choose in the first place. Click the link in the show notes for my Determine Your Values guide. It will help you take the first steps to living a values-driven and aligned life by helping you identify what matters most. If you come from a high demand background, it's possible you haven't taken the opportunity to thoughtfully consider your core values. Brene Brown said, "Living into our values means that we do more than profess our values. We practice them. We walk our talk. We are clear about what we believe and hold important, and we take care that our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors align with those beliefs." End quote. Before you can walk your talk, you must identify what your core values are. Research has shown that it is traumatizing when a therapist or mental health support person tries to impose their values upon their client. Identifying your core values is like thinking ahead of time. It reduces decision fatigue. It becomes your North Star, guiding you as you navigate new decisions or decisions you've come to realize that perhaps you didn't get to choose in the first place. Click the link link in the show notes for my Determine Your Values guide. It will help you take the first steps to living a values-driven and aligned life by helping you identify what matters most to you.